Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. Quick update on progress on the 70 Challenger RT. We got motor in chassis, suspensions all worked out and glued in place, and I've pretty much got my ride heights where I want them. I wanted to get the back down a little bit lower, but found as I was getting everything in place and figuring out how to get the rear end set in this thing, that the rear wheels hit the inside of the interior tub, so I can't get it quite as low as I wanted, but it's as low as I can get it without getting into heavy modification of the interior tub in this thing. Motor's in place, air cleaner, I've just got it tacked on there with Elmer's adhesive tack. I won't glue that to the motor until chassis is mated with the body and the interior and the hood's on it, and I get a better idea where this air cleaner has to get glued onto. So right now it's just held on with some Elmer's adhesive tack. The only thing on motor I still have to do, of course, I have to run battery wires, alternator wiring, and put my fan blade on the water pump pulley. But that'll be once this unit is in chassis, and I make sure I still have clearance for everything in the front of the motor. So far it looks pretty good, but we won't do that until we get this all mated up together. I've had a couple of guys ask me how I do my details on my undercarriage and how I get my ride heights low. It varies model to model. Hang on one second, we're going to go up here for a second, guys, so you can see what I'm talking about. Hold on. Alright, that's better. So on the front of this one, what I do, of course, I'm running Steve Zimmerman wheels on it. Decided I wasn't going to put any disc brakes behind it because you're not going to see those through the wheels anyway. So what you don't see, I typically don't worry a whole lot about. So what I did on this one is the upper control arms I use as a center line guide on where the center line of the wheels had to go. Then what I did was take a drill bit and drilled right through the frame on both sides, and of course shoved a metal axle right through the complete frame from one side to the other, just to make sure that the holes lined up and the holes were true horizontally. Then what I did was I cut those off just with a pair of side cutters and epoxied those into the frame. Then of course I had to figure out how to adapt those to the wheels. So what I did on this particular model is I used the rear hubs or the front hubs from the stock kit, and then just used some plastic tubing in two different sizes that slide in each other, and it will slide onto the metal axle rod that sticks out from the frame. So that's how I did the front on this particular one. It varies model to model. On the rear of this one, it's not as pretty as I'd like, but anyway, half the stuff you're not going to see anyway, so I spend more of my time on motors and interiors than I do on chassis, so it's pretty bare looking chassis. But what I had to do on the rear, I used the stock rear end. I had to cut it off. Where's my little pointer? Hang on. What I had to do with the rears, because I'm running Steve Zimmerman wheels, is again I used the stock hubs that came with the model kit, glued those on the back of the wheel. Then what I had to do, because of the offset is different than the stock wheels, is I had to cut the leaf springs off at first, and then cut the axle off right about here where you can see these bulges here. Then what I had to do is slide a piece of styrene over top and then adapt that through two different sizes into the hubs. And I just epoxied these two tubes on here onto the stock rear end. And then once I did that, and know what my ride height was going to be, then I had to trim the connection point between the leaf spring and where I cut it off under the rear end, shave that down, and then finally, once I had my wheels in the position that I wanted, is I could glue those on once I had that cut down. Leaf springs are in the stock location. Sometimes I have to run those inboard a little bit because I typically will run different tires on these models, and usually they're wider than what comes in the kit. So we didn't actually, and then this one didn't have to relocate them. Run exhaust on it. I use solder again because I mentioned in my other video I don't know where the exhaust system went with this car. It's probably used it on a different kit. So I've run solder from the mufflers up to the exhaust pipes, and got my tailpipes coming out the back end. We'll trim that off once we get body on and get some aluminum tips on. So bottom of my models are really not much to look at, guys. It's pretty basic, but that's the way I build. You can spend hours and hours and hours working out proper geometry and things, but typically I don't worry about that. As long as I get the look that I want, then that's what we get, and how I can achieve that, that's what I'm worried about. So chassis is basically ready to go. Body's kind of in the same state. I started to chrome foil the front A-pillar and roof line along here. But of course the chrome foil wasn't sticking to it because I didn't actually paint that, the body color. So anyway, so the chrome foil doesn't like to stick to the primer base coat that I use. So anyway, next time we'll paint the whole freaking thing. So we use Molotow on the A-pillar and across the front. So it's done. Of course, interior's glued in place. I got my battery in, so I'll have to wire that up when we get everything mated together. I've got one of my clear windshield washer tanks, or rad overflow tanks, mounted in there that I make it at offthesprue.com as well. We've got our chrome foil done for our front and rear marker lights, and again we just use the clear Tamiya red and yellow just to paint inside there, which sets those off. Of course, I mentioned when I got this kit, the chrome was such a crappy chrome job on this thing that I mentioned that I was going to de-chrome front and rear bumpers. So I've done that in their body color. So everything is kind of in little sub-assemblies. Front ends together. I painted the grille same color as the top's going to be, and same color as the wheels, just to tie all that in together. So hopefully that'll look good when it gets together. Still got to do a little bit of painting inside here before we can get that together. Rear end, same, or back tail panel, same thing. This came all chrome, so I've de-chromed that and painted the whole thing. Got the tail lights inlaid in there, and just highlighted the trim around the edge with the Molotow. So that's ready to go. Top, we just painted it, believe it or not, same color as the wheels, so it ties all these colors together. And I know a lot of these cars had black tops or white tops, but I don't know, I thought with the white and silver interior and the silver wheels that the silver top would go good with this, even though you don't see that very often. But hey, I think it's going to look good. So yeah, that's kind of where we are, guys. Hopefully the next video you see is this whole thing buttoned up and together and in its final stage. And we'll get a video up of that, of course, when that time comes. Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.